Okay, so we understand who the One Direction target audience are, and we've got a bit of a sense of the One Direction brand image. So we can kind of see how the two things go together, who the target audience are and why that target audience bought so much into One Direction as a band. Now, another thing that we have to know about, understand, and you might be asked about in your exam is why the fans were so important. So, how the audience of One Direction helped to create and maintain their success. So I think first and foremost, it's really, really important to understand, and you might be aware of this already, but this phrase fandom has been coined in the last kind of decade to describe this kind of almost obsessive, cultish groups of people who all are aligned with the same interest or value. The fandom is the most devout and most passionate members of that fan group. So the kind of main central primary fans and the ones who increase the momentum and the promotion of a band or a film or a movement, whatever it might be. So the fandom of One Direction, as we can see in the picture at the bottom, are the kind of quintessential crazed fans. So they've really earned themselves a reputation, as it says here, for their loyalty and their kind of obsessive nature. And when you get an obsessive, loyal fan base, you're onto a winner. So Simon Cowell and Psycho very, very pleased that they've managed to target this key demographic of teenage girls and get them obsessed, because once that happens, the money rolls in. It's a very successful strategy. So how did the fans help the success of One Direction? Well, a lot of music awards are voted for by fans. So we can go see a couple of examples here. In 2013, 2014, One Direction received the Brit Awards for Global Success, which is voted for on Twitter. Global Success is indicated for bands with fans outside of the UK for the Brit Awards. So it indicates that they had huge international sales. So the fandom sprawled across the globe and they were well organised enough through the medium of social media to contribute towards the critical acclaim, the success and the awards of the band. They also were fanatical to the point where, obsessive to the point where they would buy not only the singles, the albums, the downloads, but they would also purchase tickets for very expensive tours. They'd buy the merchandise, they would buy the books that came out, the documentary that came out, they would go and see that. As soon as you get a fanatical fan base, they then spend money on all elements of the band, which is how in just 3 years One Direction made the Sunday Times Rich List, which lists the richest people in different brackets in the UK. So they were on the list for richest people under 30 in the UK in terms of their combined wealth. So the media industry said the reason they were so successful was because of their fans, because of what their audience managed to do. They were very, very active. So One Direction became famous just at the same time as the real increase in use of social media. So the birth of social media had happened a few years previously, but it's really coming into its own. And things like Twitter, Facebook were being used hugely in ways they've never been done before. And all of these young people on those social media platforms. And the kind of fever of One Direction was really spread through those platforms. So they're one of the first bands to really capitalise on that in a new way. To the point where, as we can see here, the fans actually became almost as famous as the band itself. The Directioners was their kind of fandom title, and they were given the credit for getting them started. Without this big fan base, One Direction would have been one of the many X Factor not even winners that didn't go anywhere. If you think how many seasons of the X Factor and The Voice and America's Got Talent, all of these shows, how many of these artists actually get famous? Not that many. So why did One Direction? Mostly industry say because of the fans, because they had this really good fan base, really mainstream appeal, and the fanatical, obsessive nature of that fan base really pushed them towards this kind of global phenomenon. The fact that the boys were also so young and were very good at social media, so their personal accounts, their their band accounts was a huge, big part of their promotion, and it felt very authentic, and the fans really responded to that. So a specific example, if you get asked in your exam, okay, how did the fans kind of engage with the band, you could refer to this one. So during the tour in 2014, we've got here, One Direction ran this campaign, the hashtag Action1D campaign, which called for fans to send in videos of themselves talking about how they would be activists, how they'd change the world if they could. And then that was made into a film to be played at the concert. So when the fans went to the concert, they saw themselves on the screen. Again, that sense of pseudo relationship and creating the connection. But for that project, which didn't go on for very long, they had 80,000 submissions and videos from 172 countries. The hashtag was trending 2.5 billion impressions, which is when someone mentions it on social media. So you can see that it had like an absolutely huge response. So the active nature of the One Direction fan base, really important.